Hey folks, you're about to hear an exclusive bonus episode of the Whitfield Report exclusively for podcast listeners and for listeners on Anchor.fm. Enjoy. Welcome to the Whitfield Report bonus edition, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, this is a bonus episode of the Whitfield Report. So this isn't officially a full show. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, then you will see from the tags that this is a bonus show. I think they allow that on Google Play too. I'm not sure. I know that some of the podcast apps have bonus episodes and seasonal episodes, just depending on the developer and how you label them. And alright, let's shut the music off. There we go. So folks, this is a bonus episode, and I want to talk specifically about David Hogg. And the reason why I'm not doing a full official episode on this, the reason why I'm making this a bonus episode as opposed to a full episode is because I want to talk about David Hogg specifically, but I don't really feel like he's worth a whole hour of my time. But at the same time, I do want to address some things. I want to address both sides, the left and the right, and just kind of give my opinion on this kid. And I guess I should start off by saying my opinion of David Hogg. For those of you who don't know, David Hogg is one of the survivors, quote unquote, of the Parkland school shooting. And I say quote unquote because at the time I'm recording this, there's been some discrepancies with descriptions as to whether or not he was actually in the building when the shooting happened. He was definitely on campus, but there's been some debate as to whether he's been on, as to whether he was actually in the building or not. And there have been a whole bunch of conspiracy theories surrounding that, which I won't get into that part, okay? I want to make something clear here up front. This is not a conspiracy theory episode of the podcast. For those of you who listen to me regularly, you know that I don't really do conspiracy theories as a whole anyway. Sometimes I'll entertain theories that I guess some might consider conspiracy-esque, but in the close to 10 years I've been podcasting, I've never gone full conspiracy theory that I can remember. So I want to preface this whole episode by just saying There are no really big David Hogg conspiracy theories here. With that being said, at the same time, so David Hogg, as I mentioned, is a Parkland school shooting survivor. Again, there's the discrepancies with the building. But here's the reason why I'm bringing him up, and this is the reason why he's become such a big topic as of late. David Hogg has now become a public figure as a result of the Parkland school shooting. And he's become a public figure in a way that, as I said before, I don't want to get into conspiracy theories. I'm not necessarily making a full-blown conspiracy theory here, but at the same time, I will say that the way in which David Hogg has become a public figure is a little unnerving to me, to say the least. Okay? And here's the reason why. The Parkland school shooting happens, and within within literally a week, David Hogg, Emma Rodriguez, I think is her name, and one other student whose name I can't even remember right now. They all marched out for a CNN town hall. David Hogg and these other students start speaking out against the NRA, and they say that the NRA killed these kids, which is not true at all. But then these kids, as I said before, within a week of the school shooting, they become public figures. Not only that do they become public figures, but they also get verified Twitter accounts within this time frame too. And these aren't Twitter accounts that they've all had for a while. These look to be brand new Twitter accounts. Now, why is this significant? Well, because as I've discussed before on the podcast over the years, whether it be on the Whitfield Report or my old podcast, the Whitfield Analysis, Twitter has become an integral part of social media and commentary, like or not. And the platform used to be politically neutral. Now it's shifted pretty far to the left. So has Medium and, pretty much all the big social networking sites. And by the way, that social media and pretty much how it's become a big lefty thing is going to be the topic of tomorrow's official podcast. So, be on the lookout for that. Or depending on when you're listening to this, if you're listening to this on Saturday, then I'm going to be talking about Facebook and the whole social media thing and social media censorship. I'm going to be talking about that tonight. But I'm recording this on Friday, so if you're hearing this on Friday, that'll be tomorrow night's show. If you're listening to this on Saturday, it'll be tonight's show. Anyway, I know I'm rambling and kind of jumping around here, but that's how these bonus shows go. So anyway, as I mentioned before, Twitter's become a big platform for journalists and political commentators. And just to give you a little bit more background, as anyone who's logged on to Twitter pretty much knows, to become a verified Twitter user is extremely, extremely difficult. I believe most users have to have over 100,000 followers on Twitter, and they have to have been able to, they have to have been on the platform for a pretty significant amount of time, I believe. That's usually how Twitter verification works. Unless they're like movie stars or celebrities or well-known celebrities, or they have like an agent to establish that they're a well-known public figure. Okay? And yet these kids who were virtually unknown the week before the shooting happened, they get verified Twitter accounts instantly. And they become public figures almost instantaneously. And then they go out and blame the NRA for the shooting. David Hogg has said that we will outlive the NRA. He's kind of made it his mission to take the NRA down, it seems like, or so he says. I'll explain what I mean by "or so he says" in a sec. He's also weirdly picked a fight with Alex Jones, which for those of you who know me, and for those of you who have been following the podcast, really who have been following my podcasting career since about 2009 or 2010, you know that I'm by no means like a huge Alex Jones fan. I wouldn't really call myself a fan. I used to think that he was absolutely crazy. I think in more recent years, like during 2016, he's become more reasonable, and I don't think InfoWars is as bad as I used to be. But, like it or not, Alex Jones is still a very controversial figure, to say the least. And he's someone who, is known as somewhat of a provocateur. And so he's very easy to pick a fight with. And David's pretty much done. David Hogg has pretty much done that. So he's picked a fight with the NRA, and he's picked a fight with Alex Jones. Okay. Now the NRA has absolutely nothing to do with the school shooting. This kid was not an NRA member. The kid who shot up the school. He wasn't an NRA member. He did have a Trump hat on, and initially it was thought that he was a right-wing, that he was like an extreme right-winger. And then there were people who thought that he was an extreme left-winger. Well, we know that neither of those are true now, that he was actually sampling different ideologies. He was, greatly mentally disturbed, and that he was just kind of shopping around for ideologies. And really, in my mind, he took the very worst of extreme right-wingism and extreme leftism. And that's the shooter I'm talking, and I don't want to spend too much time on him. But the shooter took the worst of the two extremes of these ideologies. The NRA, for all intents and purposes, had nothing to do with the shooting. And yet, David Hogg and these other students are, claiming that the NRA is killing kids and that they don't care about kids, and that, candidates who take out NRA members are greedy and selfish, and they only care about, their political contributions, which, okay, you can make that case for just about any political cause. Conservatives say that towards political candidates who take money from Planned Parenthood. Objectively, it's the same argument. But David has taken a firm stance against the NRA and against Alex Jones. Okay? Now here's the crux of the matter, ladies and gentlemen, because I've gone pretty hard after David Hogg on Twitter this week. But I do want to make something clear. I have nothing against David Hogg personally. Okay? I'm sure that outside of politics and outside of activism, I'm sure he's a nice kid. He's only a few years younger than I am, and obviously the entire school has gone through a very traumatic ordeal. And I know that there are some, people out there online, I'm not going to name names. I don't even know them personally, but I have seen people, that do, that do hate David Hogg, and who have, criticized him on a personal level. And, I think that's wrong. But that's not me. I have kind of come up with a hashtag, on Twitter and Gab to describe him, which is hogwash, but I'll explain that in a sec too. Because my issue really isn't with David Hogg here, ladies and gentlemen. It's moreover to do with the anti-gun lobby, the unnamed anti-gun groups that are getting behind these kids. Because that's essentially what's happening here, folks. They're essentially being used as political props and political tools. That's the reason why they got Twitter verification so fast. In my mind. Google is also, I pointed this out on both Gab and Twitter and Facebook. They're now calling Wikipedia, first of all, David Hogg has his own Wikipedia page, which, for all intents and purposes, I could create a Wikipedia page, and, who knows, maybe one of these days I will on myself. But David Hogg already has a Wikipedia page, and on that page, they've all, they're calling him an American journalist. Okay? Kid is 17, 18 years old, and he's already a full-blown, bona fide journalist according to all the big tech companies, and to Wikipedia, and to even many members of the media establishment. Well, some of you might be saying, well, Sam, what's the big problem with that? You're a journalist, and you claim to be a journalist when you were a teenager. So what's wrong with that? And folks, I guess there's nothing wrong with him being a journalist or an aspiring journalist, but he's not an official bona fide journalist. Let's be honest. If he really is into journalism, he's an amateur journalist. He's a high school journalist, but he's not a bona fide journalist yet, folks. Heck, I'm not even a bona fide journalist. I'm an independent journalist. I'm an independent amateur journalist. I've been an independent amateur journalist for a long time, since I was 13 years old. But nevertheless, I'm still an amateur journalist, and I'm okay with that. And yes, I guess in a way I am a public figure too. That's another thing I can hear my critics saying. Which I might as well segue into that, folks, because here's the crux of the matter. I do mind that David Hogg is being used to promote anti-gun propaganda. Because long story short, folks, that's what's happening here. And this is my conspiracy theory, so to speak. It's not really like a far-fetched conspiracy theory, but here's what I think is happening. The right, the far left saw the success that Trump had with babes for Trump and students for Trump and millennials for Trump. And whatever other groups that there were for Trump with young people in them, the left did see us. They finally saw us, ladies and gentlemen. And, one of the whole critiques of the conservative movement for years and years and years that I always heard when I was a teenager is, there really aren't any truly independent, teenage conservatives out there, or the conservative movement is the only movement that has, teenage activists in it. And a few years ago, I would have actually agreed with them, and said that was true. And this is going to lead to another point I'm going to make here. Bear with me, this will all tie together in the end. But that was a critique of the right for the longest time, is that, we were the only ones with teenage activists. And, yeah, that was actually true for a while. And people didn't really take us people didn't really take teenage/college conservatives seriously up until the 2016 election, when not only did conservatives win the election, but in the process we kind of won a major battle in the culture war. Okay, which the culture war is kind of ongoing. And so we won a big battle in 2016. Okay? The left would have had you believe, through art and culture and everything else, that they had a monopoly on young people. And yet 2016 proved them wrong. Young conservatives and young liberty-minded individuals, such as myself, really came out of our subcultures and really hit the mainstream. And we showed them that we're out there, and there's no denying that. So what I believe is happening now is they're panicked, and in their haste, they're now trying to create young liberals, young liberal activists, which is what David Hogg and all of these other Parkland high school students with verified Twitter accounts, that's what they are now. And I don't really hold them responsible because I think they're being used in a way. I think they are aware of what's going on, but at the same time, I think they're being, I think they're being emotionally manipulated and taken advantage of. That's just how I see things objectively. Now, before some of you on the left criticize me and say, oh, well, Sam, that is just complete and total BS. You could say the exact same thing about the right, that they've manipulated that they've manipulated young kids into becoming conservative activists too. And, you could say the same thing about yourself. And I'm going to address that here, folks, because believe it or not, I actually have criticized conservatives in the past for propping up conservative wonder kids, as I've called them. In fact, back in 2015, I actually wrote a pretty lengthy column on my website, thesamwhitfield.com, on this very topic. It was called A Flaw in the Young Conservative Movement. It's still up there, and I believe it's still on medium.com too, if you look me up on there. That is if Medium hasn't shadow banned me or blacklisted me in some other way, but that's for tomorrow's show, ladies and gentlemen. So that's for the official podcast. So I'm not going to get sidetracked. But anyway, I wrote this article, and I'll link it in the show notes for this podcast. Again. But long story short, in that article, I cite how, indeed, teenage conservatives some of them, not all of them, but some of them were propped up. Individuals like Jonathan Crone, who was the first case of a teenage conservative wonder kid, right? Many people who are millennial conservatives and who are kind of in my circle, a lot of you guys know this story. Some of you don't, and most adults, and by adult I mean like over 35, don't know this story at all. But long story short, Jonathan Crone, when he was 13, he self-published a book on Amazon. I think it was called Defining Conservatism. And the book got noticed by, I think it was Bill Bennett or one of those big-time conservative radio talk show hosts. Anyway, he got noticed, and then he got invited to CPAC. And there was this big, huge thing about him, being the savior of the conservative movement, right? The conservative movement had been saved for future generations by Jonathan Crone. Right? That was when he was 13. Well, after he made it to CPAC, he never really did anything. And then when he was 17, it was actually revealed that somewhere along the line he actually changed his ideology and became more liberal. And that was a big oops moment for us. Now, I had started podcasting by this time because I was 13. I started it in 2008. So that means that this year is my 10-year anniversary, believe it or not, of podcasting, which, oh God, that makes me feel old in some ways, and, yep, that actually makes me feel proud, too, like, yeah, I've actually stuck by something for, a super long time. But, anyway, so Jonathan Crone was the first one to get put on the spotlight and turn liberal. And then there was Benji Backer, who I actually knew for a time, and Benji Backer became pretty famous as well. He also spoke at CPAC. And then, more recently, Benji became a part of the Never Trump movement, blocked me after I defended Milo Yiannopoulos. He had a real hard-on, not literally, okay, folks? I shouldn't say that when referring to Milo for obvious reasons, but, figuratively, Benji had a big grudge against Milo, and, against Trump. He went total establishment, and, I don't know that his political career is over, but he's kind of faded in the spotlight as well. Then, of course, there was Caden Cowger, my old colleague, who, he kind of became an internet meme. Because he made the stupid Obama's making kids gay joke. He wasn't one that got propped up by adult conservatives. But, he became recognizable nonetheless. And, yeah. So then there was C.J. Pearson, who's more recent, and he's like a more recent example. And C.J. Pearson is an African American young conservative. I think he's still active somewhat, but he got kind of pushed into the conservative spotlight by a lot of adult conservatives who were trying to promote him. And then it actually turned out that his manager was like a con man or an identity thief. And there's been debate and speculation as to whether or not CJ knew about that or not. But anyway, yeah, CJ is kind of another example of that too. So in my article that I mentioned, which again I'll have linked in the description for this podcast, I criticized the fact that this happens in the conservative movement. That rather than conservative adults, finding the good, independent young conservatives like me, who have done their own media and their own, thing completely independently, that they search, for young conservatives and prop them up. And so this article I wrote back in 2015 criticized conservatives for doing that. And, it actually got a pretty significant, traffic on the web. And so I've criticized the right for propping up young people in politics. At the same time, I've also, praised young people for getting involved in politics on their own volition and doing their own thing completely independently, which is how I did the podcast, how I started the podcast and how I've done the podcast all these years. And I'm not trying to brag here, folks. I'm really not. But, at various points, I did get approached by quote-unquote agents when I was a teenager, and, even now. I've been approached by people claiming to, represent big names in the conservative movement. And, I've been offered to have, to become a big figure. And, that's always made me a little suspicious personally, and I think especially now that I've been doing this for close to a decade, it really makes me thankful that I've done this thing more or less on my own, pretty much with the help of other teenage/college conservatives. I mean, the people I run with, we've pretty much all promoted each other. Ryan Marhofer, my guest on the podcast last week, he's another one that's kind of up and coming and independent. And he's doing his own thing too. So my point, going back to David Hogg, is if he were independent and if he had like a consistent body of work and a consistent track record of engaging in, let's just say, liberal policies or anti-NRA policies or something whatnot on his own, if he were a legit teenage liberal, let's say, if he were legit and it was his own thing, I would have no problem with that. I would disagree with him, obviously, but I would commend him more for doing his own thing, like a lot of us have, who are young political commentators / activists. But the fact that he and a lot of his other peers have gotten, major help from Twitter, major help from the mainstream media and whatnot, and, become celebrities and public figures overnight, that's what bothers me. Because I don't think they're doing it themselves. I think they're manipulated into doing it subconsciously. And, if somehow David is listening to this, by all means, David, come on to the Whitfield Report. And I don't want to say I would debate you so much as I just want to have a discussion and really find out, what you're all about. So I've extended, you heard it here first. I'm extending my invitation, and we'll have a conversation. And I'm open to having a dialogue if you're open to it. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, it is interesting because there's another Parkland survival, Kyle Kushov, I think is how you pronounce his name, who's also a Parkland shooter. And he doesn't want gun violence. He's kind of campaigned against stopping gun violence in schools too, which is admirable. The difference is, Kyle is not pushing anti-NRA propaganda or anti-conservative propaganda. And so therefore his Twitter account hasn't been verified yet, even though he has 50,000 followers now, the last time I checked. And he hasn't received any big major interviews on any of the mainstream media outlets yet, as far as I know. And, so he's being discriminated against because, he holds views which I don't even want to say are right-wing, quote-unquote, but he's kind of gotten lumped in with the right-wing crowd at this point. So, anyway, that's kind of my whole point. I don't hate David or any of these Parkland survivors. I'm praying for them, and I wish them, healing, and that this will make them stronger. But to the adults and to the media who are pushing them to do this, shame on you. You guys are disgusting. And really, that's all I have to say to you guys. So, folks, I guess this bonus episode has gone over longer than I expected it to be. It's definitely Saturday now by the time you're hearing this. But nevertheless, think of this kind of as a pre-show, a warm-up to the Whitfield to the Whitfield Report live stream / podcast, which, as always, folks, we will be live streaming on our Facebook page at 8 p.m. Eastern Time over on facebook.com/Whitfield Report. Audio podcast will be available as always. And folks, I don't know if we're going to have a guest.
Wait a minute.
Tomorrow evening. or for tonight's show. I still have yet to confirm that. But anyway, folks, I'll announce that if that is the case. And either way, I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you tonight for the show. Goodbye for now. God bless, and God save this great nation. I'll see you later, folks. So long.